results and discussion, and the last is conclusion. So about the history of the research, we know that there were 3 nuclear accidents happened in the last 50 years. They were Chernobyl accident, Fukushima disaster, and Three Mile Island disaster. In Fukushima disaster, we can learn a lot to safety system. So what happened? In Fukushima disaster, an earthquake occurred and followed by the tsunami, and the tsunami was flooded the basement and damaged the backup generators, which disabled the cooling system. So the temperature of the reactor rose up and caused the explosion of the reactor unit 1 and followed by reactor unit 3 and reactor unit 4. So from this disaster, we need the improvement, especially for the safety system of the reactor. And one of the advanced technology is about safety plug, which is used in molten salt fast reactor. The molten salt fast reactor itself is one of the 4th generation of reactor, and the reactor generation 4 is the reactor which has the highest score in safety and sustainability. So this is the design of MSFR, and here there is a pipe which is connected to the safety tank under the reactor. At the top of the pipe there is a freeze plug here, and can be melted when the temperature of the reactor is up to the maximum temperature. Usually the freeze plug is only use one pipe, but in this research I will try to simulate the new design which use the multiple pipe. So this is the multiple pipes in one plug, and the purpose of this design is to make the melting time be faster. So the cooling system of the reactor will be faster too. And the other advantage of this design is the height of the frozen salt can be less because the cross-sectional area of each pipe is smaller. This is the design of one pipe. So in the middle, this is the frozen salt, which will be melted when the nuclear accident happen, and will be change the path between solid to liquid. And this frozen salt is surrounded by the metal. There is 2 types of the metal. For this is the Hastelloy N, and the other material. In this research, I will choose the copper to this design, because copper has a larger thermal conductivity than the Hastelloy N. And the physical properties which is used in this simulation is about heat transfer. There are 2 types of heat transfer that will use in this simulation. There are conduction and convection. Conduction is heat transfer between the heat transfer in the scale of one molecule. So in one material, if there is a gradient of temperature, the heat will be transferred from the higher temperature to the lower temperature. And the conduction heat transfer is depends on the thermal conductivity of the material. And the convection is the heat transfer from the molten salt from the vessel into the metal of the plug. And the convection depends on the convection heat transfer coefficient. And because the molten salt and the metal has two different coefficients, we will use the universal coefficient, and the equation is here. And the thickness of the other material, which is copper, can be changed to find the optimal heat transfer. And in this simulation, I will calculate the draining time too. So the drainage time depends on the radius of tank, the radius of pipe, and the fanning friction factor, the length of the pipe, the diameter of the pipe, resistance coefficient, and height of the tank, and also gravity. So when all the frozen salt is melted, the molten salt here will be flow into the safety tank under the reactor, and will has volume flow rate. So from the volume flow rate, we can calculate the amount of the pipes which is needed, because the new design and the old design must have an equal drainage time. So we can calculate the amount of pipes with the volume flow rate of one pipe divided by the volume flow rate of multiple pipes. So the geometry of the plug, there are two geometry, which is used square geometry and hexagon geometry. But in COMSOL, we will use the circle geometry, and from this boundary will be more representative to the hexagon geometry. These are the material properties of molten salt, which is lithium fluoride, thorium fluoride. There are density, kinematic viscosity, dynamic viscosity, thermal conductivity, and specific heat capacity. We choose the temperature at 923 Kelvin. So the time simulation, the simulation time is from 0 until 50 seconds with time step 0.01 second, and the initial temperature is 780 Kelvin, but at the top of the plug will has the different temperature because there is heat transfer from the molten salt. So in the top of the plug will has the temperature of 900 Kelvin, and for the mesh there are 432 elements, which the part of 320 of molten salt, and 90 of histoloid N, and 22 of copper. And this is the parameter of the parameter which will use in this simulation. So now we will talk about the results. The first is about the copper. So we can find that from this simulation, we can see that copper can accelerate the melting time process. So this is the pace indicator, and this is the length of the pipe of the plug. So 0 is in the bottom and 2.5 is in the top of the plug. So in time at the time 40 seconds, we can see that in the range of 1.2, which is only has the low end, it changed from solid to liquid. But with copper, in the same time, there is a phase change in 0.7 meter. The second result is the melting time with variation of copper thickness. So there are three variations. The copper thickness there are 1.5 millimeter, 2.5 millimeter, and 3.5 millimeter. So from this result, we can conclude that copper thickness influence the melting time. So from these three graphs, we can see that the phase indicator is different between three these graphs. So, but the fastest melting time is at the thickness 2.5 millimeter. And the next result is about melting time with variation radius of plug. So from this graph, we can see that the radius of the plug influence the melting time. And when the radius of plug become greater, the melting time will be faster from this graph. And the next is about the drainage time with a variation of pipe length and the diameter. So from this graph, we can conclude that the length of pipe does not have a significant effect at 3.5. So this here in the length of pipe at 3.5, there is no significant effect from for the drainage time.
You have 1 minute to conclude your presentation.
Okay, sir. So in the next simulation, we will use 3.5 meter in the length of the pipe. This is the drainage time with variation of pipe radius. So the greater radius of pipe will decrease the drainage time, and the big effect of radius on drainage time is when radius less than 0.05 meter. So when we know that the volume of flow rate is 0.2135 meter cubic per second, we can calculate the amount of the pipe. So this is the amount of the pipe with the difference radius. And the total time depends on the radius of the pipe. So the total time will vary between 118 seconds until 124 seconds. This is less than the total permitted time of 8 minutes, and therefore this design could be a possible new design for the safety plug. So this is the conclusion, and the most important is this new design could be incorporated in tractors in the future. So that's enough for me. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, we have time for one question from the audience. Okay, how many time do you require to get one simulation done in this study?
In this study, I need between 6 until 10 hours to do the simulation, sir.
Okay, thank you, Nita, for presentation. We're going to move on to the third presenter, which is Iqbal Aidina, talking about land subsidence in Jakarta.
Okay, sir. Apa sih? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. My name is Iqbal Aidina, and I am from Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Science at Institut Teknologi Bandung. So today I would like to talk about land subsidence in Jakarta. First of all, Jakarta is a beautiful city. It is capital city of Indonesia. Most people come from another city to Jakarta for seeking their fortune. And with all people coming to Jakarta, Jakarta becomes one of the most populous city in the world. According to Anies Baswedan, the governor of the Jakarta, population density in Jakarta has reached 16,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. With a geographic structure near the coast, and some of them are swampy area, Jakarta is facing the threat of sinking. In 2050 projection, 95% of North Jakarta will be submerged. So today, this is my topic. There is problem, subsidence history, measuring subsidence, unraveling the subsidence signal, modeling the subsidence, scenario for Jakarta subsidence, and conclusion. So the first one is problem. There is two problems, that is sea level rise and land subsidence. The sea level rise is about 2 millimeter per year, and it is caused by global warming. And since it's global, it means the Jakarta itself cannot handle this problem alone. So in this study, this factor will be ignored. And then we move on to the land subsidence. Land subsidence is gradual downward settling of the ground surface. So basically the land is pushed down to the earth and deformated. And then there are two causes, that is excessive water extraction and heavy building. And some of you might think why water extraction can lead to this problem, the land subsidence. So let me tell you a bit. So imagine if a sponge is a soil, and then if we put a weight on it, the water in the sponge will be squeezed out and the sponge will be deformated. So if the sponge is big enough and the pore of sponge smaller, then the water in the sponge will be trapped and force the sponge to keep its shape. So same as the sponge, so same as this in the soil, if we extract the groundwater too much, then the water in the ground will be lost and there are no supporting the soil to keep it safe. Then the land subsidence is occur. And this is the subsidence history in several coastal city. The red line is the red line here is the absolute sea level rise. It is used in this graph. It is used for the reference. And as we can see here, the Jakarta in recent years, the subsidence rate is getting worse and worse. So the government and all of us should take action immediately. And if you look at Tokyo in 1975, Tokyo has tackled this problem, and we see the cumulative subsidence after 1975. It is constant, and so the problem is solved. And then we measuring the subsidence. So measuring the subsidence, there are some ways to measuring the subsidence. There is optical leveling, global positioning system or GPS survey, lidar, and interferometric synthetic aperture radar or INSAR. In early world, optical leveling is used to measuring the subsidence, but in nowadays, global GPS survey, lidar, and INSAR are more favorable since it gives us more accurate result. But lidar and INSAR is relative measurement, so we have to combine it with the optical leveling so we can see bigger information. And then this is the unraveling the subsidence signal. So in the first one, I say the subsidence is caused by water extraction and heavy building, but the nature itself can lead to the land subsidence, like the tectonic activity, like earthquake, can make the land more downward. So this is a land subsidence in New Orleans. The nature subsidence in New Orleans is around 2 mm per year, but the total subsidence in New Orleans is 6 mm. So human induced subsidence is more greater than the nature itself. So after we see the source of the subsidence, we modeling it using the odometer test. And odometer test is basically a stress test, but it is for soil. And since the Jakarta is a soft soil, then the graphic will look like this. So the characteristic of soft soil is the stress strain is not a single curve like this, but it is a family of stress strain curve like this. And then this is in the black one is the odometer test, and the colored one is fitting the model. So as we can see here, this is the green one is ABC ISO taken, the yellow one is Copejan, and the blue one is Jerome ISO taken. And we see the Copejan cannot measure it, cannot model it accurately because it is used classical theory. Because in soft soil there is called creep deformation. The creep deformation is basically what is it? A process that effective stress when in clay. And then in 2015, Bakri has calculated a scenario for Jakarta subsidence. There are four scenario. The first one is drawn down for all aquifers are kept 0 till 2100 by maintaining piezometric levels at their values of 2010. So basically this is the water in the groundwater is kept like so, the output and the input is balanced, so there are no residue. And the second one is drawn down for all aquifer in increase 5 meter every 5 years from 2010 till 2030. So this is a slow recovery. We increase the water in the groundwater 5 meter every 5 years. And then the third one is piezometric heads are recovered for all aquifer by 2015 to their values of 1995. So this is the recovery, and we use 1995 reference. And the last one is piezometric heads are recovery for all aquifers by 2015 to the maximum level of all aquifer in 1995. So the last one is full recovery. And then we simulate this scenario and we see this result. So this is 2000. So this paper is 2020, and we simulate it until 2100. So even if we use the scenario 4, there are still subsidence, a little bit of subsidence. So additional strategy must be implemented immediately. So the last one is conclusion. That is, human-induced land subsidence dominates the total subsidence signal, and land surface elevation measurement need to be combined with in-situ measurement in order to be able to unravel the total subsidence signal. I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have time for 3 questions from the audience.
Sir, I would like to ask Iqbal.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Iqbal. My first question is this presentation only about the measurement, or there is solution to solve this problem?
So this is like I've been taught before, this is a simulation. By using the first scenario, there is land subsidence. So it is like what? It is solution, but it's not quite tackle the problem. Yeah, something like that, maybe. Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, another question from the audience, please.
Okay, I want to ask. My name is Johnson. So I want to ask about the analogy that you give in the first place. So you give the analogy from the spots. It's actually like refer to the excessive water extraction, or maybe it's like to be the second one. So what is your refer?
Oh, the analogy is focused on the water extraction. I mean, it's when the sponge is dry, so there are no water in it, right? And the sponge, there are no supporting sponge to keep it safe.
Okay, I think because when I doing some research, when I actually run it too, I think your analogy is more like the second one. So it's be like the heavy burden. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, another question from the audience. Okay, is it also considered in this modeling the the amount of water extracted daily used by the Jakartans in order for the daily use?
So in this study, it's not quite calculated, but it's based on the storage in the ground. So like in this scenario one, there are no change in the storage. The scenario two is increased a little bit, and the last scenario is full recovery. So
Because the
if
reason why, because the reason why subsidence occur in Jakarta, one of the reason is that because groundwater extraction becomes overwhelmed because it's too many water extracted by the populations there. So the pores of the body becomes empty, and then due to the overburden, the pores becomes smaller and smaller. So that's why the level of land in Jakarta becomes decreasing by time to time. So that is one of the reasons why we have that subsidence in Jakarta, and also not only Jakarta but also in major cities like Surabaya and also in the southern part of Bandung, where water extractions becomes overwhelmed. Okay, becomes too many. So therefore, due to the decreasing pore pressure, the overburden that's coming from the topsoil becomes makes the ground level becomes downward and downward. Okay, so thank you, Iqbal, for giving the presentations related to the land subsidence in Jakarta. We're going to move on to the fourth presenter. The fourth presenter is Lulu Lail Fauzan, talking about the groundwater potential identification using 2D geoelectric method.
Anyone can hear my voice?
Yes.
Wait.
Okay, whenever you're ready, you may start your presentation.
Sir, if size of presentation like this,
okay, it's okay. But if you can, make it full screen, if you're able to do that. Is it on PDF or PPT?
this just can this size, no problem, sir.
Yes, no problem. But if you can, please make it full screen. If you cannot, just do what as it is.
Maybe just like this.
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay. Make the thumbnail a little bit smaller.
Okay.
On the left.
Lulu, I think you can doing from the from current slide. So do you see the from current slide? Just click it. I think it's okay. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Johnson.
Thank you, Johnson. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum.
My name is Lula Fauzan. Good morning, sir and everyone. Today I will present my final paper about applied of geoelectric method The title is Groundwater Potential Identification Using Two-Dimensional Geoelectric Method in Grand Puri Bunga Nirwana Housing Area with Vendor Configuration. So the outline of this presentation is an introduction, literature review, research method, and result and conclusion. For introduction, it begins with the background why this paper was written. First, every year, the world population is increased, especially in this Jember district. This has made housing construction increase as well. On the other hand, local communities generally use shallow well as search water. Due to the increase in housing construction, it can increase water demand, especially in the Grand Puri Bunga Nirwana housing area. So that the presence of water in this region is very important, and groundwater can be used as an alternative, but the potential for it in this region is not well known. So the objective of research, the firstly is to identification of point and depth of the aquifer layer in Grand Puri Nirwana housing area, and then to prediction of groundwater debit potential in Grand Puri Bunga Nirwana housing area, and the scope of research is our research location in Grand Puri Bunga Nirwana housing area Jember. The length of track research that used is 410 meters. The distance between electrode is varied by 5 meters, 10 meters, and 15 meters. The configuration that used is Wenner configuration. This method using resistivity mapping is just to detect a horizontal area. Software for data processing that used is Residiv. So this is a literature review about groundwater. The definition of groundwater is in generally, groundwater was water that occupies a hole in the geological layer or bedrock space, or we know as aquifer layer. As we know, the water cycle occurs in 3 processes: evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Based on the hydrological cycle, water that falls to the Earth's surface through the rain process will be returned to ocean or sea. There are 2 ways the rainwater returns to the origin place. The first is surface runoff, where the water flow on the surface to the sea in a relatively fast time. And the second is groundwater flow, where water will be absorbed into the ground and trapped in the aquifer layers, so that the water flow into the sea for a relatively long time because it moves through the pores of the soil. So this is aquifer layer. Groundwater storage space known as aquifer, which is a geological formation that has the ability to store and carry water underground in large enough quantities to wells or springs. The aquifer layer is a water binding formation that consists of loose material such as sand and gravel. So that large amounts of water can move through this layer. Generally, aquifer can be divided into 2 aquifers. There are unconfined aquifer. This is the position of groundwater stored in aquifer at the surface to 40 meters, or it is a shallow groundwater. And then confined aquifer, the position of groundwater stored in aquifer more than 40 meters. This is literature about resistivity formulation. For this research, use a Wenner configuration where the distance between electrodes is the same, which is equal to A, like this picture. P for current electrodes, and C for potential electrodes. The firstly, formulation of geoelectric method is derived from Ohm law, so we can get an equation like equation number 1. G is density of current, and E for electrical field, and rho is resistivity. The direction of current flow to radial, so electrical field, like equation number 2, just our direction. And then assume there are not current underground and medium by isotopic homogen. With law of conservation of charge and the term of Laplace equation, potential equation can be obtained as equation number 3, where nabla dot P equals 0 because not current underground. And then we use spherical Laplacian, we get electrical potential in C1 and C2. There are potential electrodes with this distance R2 unlimited. A question for potential electrodes like equation number 4. So from equation 1, we can get correlation between area and current that occur in current electrodes. For both electrodes have same value, but the direction of current is opposite. So equation 5, like in the slide, if equation 5 substitutes to equation 4, we can get electrical potential in potential electrode C. It can be obtained different potential like equation number 6. So this is a formulation of Wiener configuration to determine apparent resistivity that we'll use. Like equation number 7, where key is geometry factor. And then this is research method. Geoelectricity is a geophysical method to determine resistance change of rock layers below the surface ground by flowing a DC electric current which has a high voltage. Research method step 1 is research site observation, and then learning a research site hydrology and lithology map, and then resistivity measurement in a file. This research with use configuration Wiener, like my explained beforely, and then processing resistivity data with Microsoft Excel and ResToDiff. And last, interpreting data according resistivity reference. So this is result and conclusion. There are this is picture number 4. There are 3 pictures. The first picture is with distance of electrode is 5 meter, and then 10 meter. And the last 15 meter. Axis W is shown the length of the track that used is this research, and axis Y shown maximum depth they obtained. The length of track that used is 410 meter, and a maximum depth that obtained in this research is 51.8 meter. Data processing from ResToDiff inform resistivity distribution underground. It is equivalent layer, which is represented by various colors that give information about underground layer structure that represented by apparent resistivity. According a research site hydrology and lithology map, the research interpreting resistivity data can see like this slide. Lithologically, the research location is in a volcanic sediment area that consists of tuff, breccia lava, and andesite lava. Hydrogeologically, the aquifer productivity of the research location is classified by medium aquifer with wide distribution. Generally, the well debit is less than 5 liters per second. Back to picture number 4. The resistivity that obtained is on range from 0.55 ohm meter to 371 ohm meter. There are table 1 to table 3. This is interpretation of measurement data of the electrode distance for 5 meter, 10 meter, and this is for 15 meter. The depth of 0 to 10 meter, groundwater has not been found because the layer is clay. The depth of 10 to 23, there was groundwater. The layer are silt, sandy clay, and soap. The depth of 23 to 38 meter, this is predicted the ground layer are sandy clay and sandstone. The depth of 38 to 51.8 meter, this is predicted as the aquifer layer. There are sandstone, sand, and gravel. So this is a conclusion for this research. Geologically, the research site has rock lithology component, volcanic sediment. The constituent rocks are in the form of clay, sandy clay, slate, soap, sandstone, sand, and gravel. Hydrogeologically, aquifer are classified as medium productive with wide distribution. Aquifer co-potential, directly debit groundwater, is predicted to be less than 5 liters per second, and the aquifer layer is at a depth of 38 to 51.8 meters. The evaluation of this research, according to a result of this research, use resistivity mapping. So if one to get result information of distribution and resistivity with more than deep in vertical, required a geoelectric method with use resistivity sounding. And this is the reference for this research. Maybe enough for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lulu. We have time for 3 questions from the audience.
I have questions, sir.
Yes, please.
Thanks for your presentation, Lulu. I will ask about your method. Why are you using the Wenner configuration in this study, in this method? Don't use other configurations such as Sunburst-C configuration, body conversion, and etc. Why?
Okay.
Just
I will answer the question from Fajar. I chose this topic because the Wenner configuration is unique. The meaning is simple, but the results are as good as other configurations. Also, because the location in research location is quite of a lot of noise, the Wenner configuration can reduce it because it produces a higher signal. Maybe it's my answer.
Okay, thanks, Lulu.
Okay, another question from the audience.
Sir, I want to ask.
Yes, please.
Okay, Lulu, thank you for the presentation. I want to ask about what is the range for the voltage and current measurement from this configuration.
Oh, I'm sorry, Martin, because I take this from paper, and then in this paper not explain the voltage that used. Yes, in the paper not explain that use. So jadi so I don't know voltage that used in this research.
Oh, okay, but
is this a multi-electrode equipment or a single channel equipment?
I think multi-channel equipment. Sorry.
Okay, if it's multi-channel, Martin, I guess the 0.7, but if the amplification available, it could be extended into 1.0 something amperes in order to get the in order to get the data from the deeper layer available, we can make an amplification on the current so that the current will be close to 1 ampere, but not more than that. But for voltage, I guess probably it is typical for a multi electrode channels, multi electrode equipment, so that the range for that should be coming out from the data set of the equipment itself. Because usually if we use a single channel geoelectric equipment, the current that we can inject into the earth should be can be larger, okay, can be larger, but for multi-channel, usually they use less for current. Okay. Is there any more question from the audience?
I want to ask a question, please.
Okay.
So you mentioned that the debit is less than 5 liters per second. So how do you exactly estimate that figure based on the data?
The result of debit is less 5 liter per second is from data sheet of map for this lithology in this research location. So and then for this research to make matching it, and we conclude the debit for water for groundwater for this area less of 5 liter per second.
So you need another measurement, another hydro something measurement, that so like that.
I think there are measurement, other measurement to can measure that debit, but this paper explains we see the dataset from map research location.
Oh, I see. Thank you, Lulu.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I'm going to thank Lulu for his presentation and then move on to the 5th presenter of today, which is Nafi Aulan Rahman, which is going to talk about the Monte Carlo method in simulating radiotherapy dosimetry.
Okay, is my presentation.
Okay, you may start whenever you're ready.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, good morning, Shar. Good morning,
okay,
everybody.
Good morning.
I want to talk about the Monte Carlo method in simulating radiotherapy in dosimetry, or more accurately, I want to talk about comparing Monte Carlo code that is used in radiotherapy dosimetry. So, what is radiation therapy? Radiation therapy is one of many methods that is used to treat cancer. There are many radiation sources that can be used for the treatment. And then the goal of this radiation therapy is to damage the cancer cell while limiting harm to the surrounding cell. So to reach this goal, it is not easy, and it needs to be more safe, because while we are playing with human life here, We need the therapy to be more secure, more safe, and more accurate in locating the cancer cell. So there needs to be a simulation to calculate those, to calculate the radiation and also the effect to the body. Then comes the Monte Carlo method. Monte Carlo method is one method to simulate those calculations in radiation therapy. Many extensive research has been made since the start of the Monte Carlo method use. Many code have been developed, many methods with different algorithm have been developed, and that is because the popularity of Monte Carlo method has increased since 1970. That is caused by the increase in computing power. You can see here that the computing power since 1940 or 1960 here, it go bigger and bigger. We now have more computing power. This is the supercomputer that this is the computing power of supercomputer at the time to here 2000 era. This and then here is the normal. This is the other. So with this increase of computing power, many Monte Carlo code have developed and become popular. So some of Monte Carlo code is here. We have Vetran, EGS4, EGS-NRC, MNC4, Penelope, and GAN4. So we want to compare three of this code. It is the EGS-NRC, Penelope, and GAN4. So how to compare this Monte Carlo method? First, I have data on the simulation of electron scattering using that three method. Also, the second one, I have the simulation of tick target Bremsstrahlung using these three methods. So, what is electronic scattering? Well, you know that when electron is colliding with other, when electron is colliding with other particle or other atom or something like that, the electron is scattered, right? And so we want to know how much the scatter angle, how the energy, how is the energy, and something like that. So in this simulation, we use the monoenergetic electron beam, and using energy 13 MeV and 20 MeV. In the simulation, we calculate the characteristic angle of the foil used to scatter the electron. The characteristic angle of the foil is different. Is different depending on the material that's used as the foil. So in here, the picture, we see the what is it? We see the how the electron come. This electron come from one and then go to here, get scattered in foil, and then go to here, monitored, and it goes on until here. So we can, with this tool, we can calculate the characteristic angle of the foil. So here is the result of scattering simulation. The left one have 13 MeV energy, you see we have EGS and RC, GN4, and Penelope. In here, we use many different material for the foil. We have beryllium, carbon, aluminium, titanium, copper, and gold. In ESG and RC, we can see that it is not having many difference with the measurement data, the experiment data. So here the y-axis is the difference between the squared angle of the calculated one and the squared characteristic angle of the measurement. So in EGS and RC, we see not that much of difference between the calculated data and the measured. In Gen4, however, we see in this gold, in the gold foil, we see a big difference between the calculated data and the measured experiment. And on Penelope, it is also not that much deviation, but for this only this beryllium, somehow it is very far from the measurement data. In the 20 MeV energy, the EGS and RC again have a good calculation compared to the measurement data. And then in Gen, again in the gold foil, it is somehow have a big deviation. And Penelope also the same as before, that it is good data. It have a little deviation from the experiment except for the beryllium. So the result of the simulation, this EGS and RC calculated the characteristic angle 0 until 4% lower than measured, with the average characteristic angle estimate is 1.3% lower. Also, in the 20 MeV energy, the EGS and RC result varied from 3% lower to 1% higher, with the average of the result is 1.1% lower than the measured. For Penelope, the result is 0 until 3% higher for the 13 MeV energy, and 0.0 until 4% higher for the 20 MeV. Characteristic angle estimate is 1.1% higher on average in both energy compared to the experimental data. In Gen4, the result were 3% lower to 2% higher. So these have biggest, widest range. So it is 5% compared to the experimental data. Also, the average of characteristic angle estimate, it has 0.7% lower on average in the 13 MeV energy. And in 20 MeV, it also has wide data from 4% lower to 2% higher, with characteristic angle average in 0.9% lower. So for the second data, it is the simulation of tick target Bremsstrahlung. So what is Bremsstrahlung? Well, Bremsstrahlung is breaking radiation. You know, when an electron or charged particle come to near atom or near area, of atoms, so it might have reduced its kinetic energy because of the interference of the atom or other particle. That energy is then converted to Bremsstrahlung radiation. So what will we do in this simulation? So we do this. You see there is an electron beam, and there is a target material, and then the detector. So we have that angle 30, it's there. So we will change that. We will vary that, and also we vary the energy. Also, the one that is calculated is fluence. It is then compared to the experimental data. So the energy variance is 10 until 30 MeV with increment of 5 MeV. Also, the different angle use, the beam angle use is 0 until 90 degree with 50 megavolt ray. So here is the result of the simulation. This is a photon diode. You see here, we have 6 data, 2 for each method. We have.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have 1 minute to conclude your presentation.
So we have this, and we can see that GAN4 is not good in fluence in predicting the fluence, but it is also not. But compared to the best one for this is EGS and RC. For the angle variation, it is also the same with GAN4 is not good, but well, maybe the best is Penelope or EGS and RC. There's also the photon energy distribution that we get from the Bremsstrahlung simulation. It is energy variance. Here we see how the fluence have different energy, photon energy. We can see that it is a little bit not accurate in LNPB, but the tree is not very good in calculating. Also, we also have this in photon energy distribution. We have low angle and high angle. In low angle, all of the simulation Monte Carlo method is not good in calculating the fluence. In high angle, it is better. So, okay, let's go to conclusion. So, from all of this simulation, the Monte Carlo method have a good accuracy to be used as simulation in the radiotherapy. Some code is better than the other, like the EGS and RC is better in overall is better than those two, but again, I think is little less. Thank you for the time. I think this all.
Okay, we have time for one question for Nafi from the audience. Okay, for Monte Carlo simulation, since we need random generator to operate in the code, it takes time to make a full simulation. So, what kind of method that we can propose to use in order to make the simulation run faster?
What kind of? Sorry, what kind of what?
What kind of advancement or improvement that we can use so that the simulation becomes faster, in your opinion?
Well, the simplest one is to increase the computing power, of course, but the code, well, we can improve the code to make it easier, but I think it's a little harder compared to, well, increasing the computing power, because I mean it is a random generator and everything is counted, so it is hard to make advancing code, I think.
Okay, with that, we're going to conclude Nafis' presentation and move on to the sixth presenter, which is Badri Ainun Taufik.
Thank you. Wait a minute.
Yes, sir. Can I start now?
Yes. Okay, the time is yours.
Oh, wait, sir. I'm sorry. Oh, wait.
F5 full
Sorry,
screen.
sir. Is my screen already?
Yes.
Seen?
Yes, you may start.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Harry. I'm Badri Ainun Taufik for Department Physics. I'm gonna talk about analysis of metal nanomaterials as dengue sensor using finite element method. So the outline of what I'm gonna talk about are the background and the dengue virus, and next the localized surface plasma resonance or LSPR, and then there is finite element method, and the last is simulation and the results. First, the dengue virus has been a common disease in Indonesia and is also known as endemic disease in Indonesia, which can be found all year round. And until now, no vaccine has been found. So many dengue virus sufferers get treatment late because they are not detected early. So to control the spread of dengue fever, an efficient detection and diagnostic tool is needed. First, let me tell you a little bit about dengue virus. After entering the human body, the dengue virus reproduces for 5 until 7 days. And due to this infection, the antibodies that appear on the body generally are IgG and IgM antibodies. IgM antibodies increases for a short time. They are first line of defense against the infection. And then the IgM antibody slowly decreases and is replaced by IgG antibodies. And next is about localized surface plasma resonance. It is the main method actually. The material used is metal nanoparticles, specifically its nanorod. Surface plasma resonance process occurred, which causing the appearance of a plasma wave. Localized surface plasma resonance, or LSPR, is the result of the imprisonment of surface plasma in the nanoparticle of estimate comparable to or smaller than the wavelength of light utilized to energize the plasma. Next, about the finite element method. The method analyzes the Helmholtz wave equation and displays it in the form of a matrix. In this method, the approach is carried out by dividing the surface charge into small elements, which are connected via nodes, which produce simultaneous algebraic equations. The approximation result, according to this continuous system, is the state of the vector H plane that has been obtained. And here is the zooming of electric field of the nanorod from the COMSOL simulation. Here are some methods that can be used to detect the dengue virus. There are already some research showing that detection tool with surface plasmon resonance or SPR is more time efficient and has high sensitivity. This SPR sensor used gold as the material. And how it works. First, the IgM antibody from the blood sample will be detected on nanostructure device, and then the nanostructure device can detect the molecular targets in biomolecular detection. The biomolecular itself is the IgM antibody. So it is important to determine type of metal of the nanoparticle that we will use. And this is the simulation to find out the difference response for using different metal for detection to materials. For this simulation, it only used gold and silver. The simulation is done with COMSOL, and then the data is processed by MATLAB. Using this frequency of plasma from each metal as the input in COMSOL. And you can see there's only tiny difference of number in frequency plasma from gold and silver. And here are the results. We have scattering cross-sectional curve for gold in the left and for silver in the right. You can see the difference for the range and peak for each curve. The variation of radius is from 10 nanometer until 100 nanometer. For the gold material, the peak of curve for radius nanometer is only about 40,000 nanometer square. And for the silver material, we have the peak of the curve for 100 nanometer is about 60,000 nanometer square, and the range curve for gold material is wider than curve for silver. And what does that mean? The range and peak of the curve corresponds to surface plasmon band. Silver has a higher peak, resulting in a greater resolution, and this causes the sensitivity increasing, so that is better at detecting IgM antibodies. And also the variation of nanorod dimension, it is the radius of nanorod, affect the response of nanoparticle to incoming electromagnetic waves. The larger the radius of nanorod, the greater of the latitude amplitude. The reason is the larger of the dimension causes the larger surface that interacts with electromagnetic waves. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for 3 minutes for Badri. Is there any question from the audience?
Sir, I want to ask.
Yes, please.
Okay, really thanks for the presentation. I want to ask and want to know why only gold and silver are chosen.
Yes. I only actually the previous research that I found, they use the same method, LSPR method. They use gold as the material for nanoparticle. So I want to see the difference response for using the other type of metal. And actually at first I use 4 type of metal. It is gold, silver, copper, and aluminum for the simulation. but the data for copper and aluminum is still error, so I just use silver as the comparison with the gold. But theoretically, silver still has the best sensitivity and resolution than these three metals. I hope it answers your question.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other question from the audience?
Sorry, I want to ask.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Badru, for your presentation today. Now I want to ask about your data. Actually, are you do another various for do the simulation maybe radius? It is using nanorod, isn't it?
Yes, I use the nanorod.
Okay, maybe for the are you just do variation for material, or you do another variation for this simulation? Maybe material.
Okay, thank you for the question. Oh, wait, you can see the result here. There is a variation for the radius of nanorods, and I already explained that the variation of nanorod dimension affect the response of nanoparticle to incoming electromagnetic waves. So the larger the radius of nanorods, it makes the amplitude greater.
Okay, thank you, Riri. So you another variation that's about radius, right?
Yes, I use the variation of radius for the nanorods.
Okay, thank you, Riri.
Okay, thank you, Alice.
Okay, with that, we're going to move on to the last presenter of today. I'd like to thank Badri for her presentation. The last presenter of today's session will be Irham Zaki Ibrahim, which is going to talk about an overview on magnetotelluric method.
Can you see my PPT?
It's processing at the moment. Yeah, it's working. Yeah, I can see your PPT now.
Assalamualaikum.
You may start whenever you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Irham Zaki Ibrahim. Thank you for the opportunity to share my studies. I am a member of Physics of Earth and Complex System Research Group. In this session, I would like to share with you about my studies regarding magnetotelluric method. Usually, when there's news about volcano, it says about natural disaster, that is volcano eruption. But the existence of volcano also opened a discussion about renewable energy called geothermal energy. So now how do we know whether there is a geothermal energy reserve around a volcano or not? The answer is you have to use geophysical exploration. And one of the methods to do geophysical exploration is a magnetotelluric method. From now on, I will abbreviate it as MT method. In this session, I will talk about ring of fire and volcano, then about geothermal system, and then magnetotelluric method. First, the ring of fire is a string of volcanoes and sites of seismic activity. It's located around the edge of Pacific Ocean. Roughly 90% of all earthquakes occur along the ring of fire, and the ring of fire is dotted with 70% of all active volcanoes on Earth. From those 70%, 120 of volcanoes are located in Indonesia. This map shows tectonic plates. There are around 20. The lithosphere, which is the rigid layer of the planet, composed the crust and upper mantle, is broken up into 7 very large continents and ocean-sized plates. These plates move relative to each other and interact along their boundaries, where they converge, diverge, or slip past each other. And such interaction are responsible for the most of Earth's seismic and volcanic activity. Although there might be activity inside the plates, not the edge. A volcano is a fan in Earth's surface from which lava, rock, ash, and hot gas erupt. Most volcanoes, are located in the edge, just like this map. This map shows volcano location in Indonesia. Next is geothermal system. In general definition, geothermal system is a heat transfer system between upper mantle and crust, where heat transfers from a heat source to heat sinks. This is a picture of geothermal reservoir. And then magnetotelluric method is a geophysical exploration method using the properties of EM field to describe the properties and distribution of electricity below the Earth's surface. This resulting field is known as the telluric field that flows through the Earth. The frequency used for MT are vary from the very low to very high. By using the very low frequency, the MT can detect subsurface resistivity to a tens of kilometer depth. These are two main sources of natural EM signals for MT exploration. The first is the frequency in interval 1 to 10,000 Hertz. This EM field is generated by lightning activity. And the second is for below 1 Hertz. This frequency comes from fluctuation in Earth magnetic field, which caused by solar wind interaction with magnetic in the magnetosphere. This fluctuation exists because magnetosphere is exposed to the solar wind. Then, with the MT method, what kind of information we can get? The first is lithology, then hydrological, stratigraphic or structural, and then thermal information. Lithology is rock composition, mineral and clay content. The hydrological are resistivity influenced by porosity, grain size distribution, permeability, fluid saturation, fluid type, and phase state. Then the structural are detection of permeable pathways, fracture, and faults. Then the thermal information, it is about resistivity that increase by temperature. Then, why should we use MT method? In geothermal exploration, the MT method is often used because its excellence in detecting earth layers with different resistivity of various rock. In addition, the penetration depth, the range of waves propagates. Then, since it's portable, the workpiece, when coverage large areas, can be do in little time. Then it has simple data acquisition, but it also has disadvantage, that is sensitive to noise. The magnetic chloric are sensitive to noise such as power lines, pipelines, electric fans, and any other source of PM noise. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for 3 questions for Irham Zaki. Okay, question from the audience for Irham. Okay, in your study, in order for us to have good data for MT, what should student or what should the data acquisition team do in order to get a good quality data?
The main one is to set a field procedure that is far from noise, and we can do a measurement at several times. That is what I found in my studies.
Okay, if we cannot, but if noise is always happen, so if our data cannot be separated from noise, what should we do then in terms of the data acquisition and also in data processing? So if we have a case where our measurement location is close to the PLN network or close to the power generator that we cannot avoid because the point of measurement is important in our study. So what can we do then in terms of data acquisition and also in terms of data processing?
We can try to filter it when we process.
Yeah, that is for data processing, but in data acquisition, what should we do then?
Oh, sorry, but unfortunately, I didn't cover that topic in my studies.
Okay. So we have question from the audience for Irham. Okay, if there is no question, let us conclude our session for Thursday, April the 22nd. I would like to thank to all 7 presenters that already made their talk today. We're going to meet again on Monday for the 4th session of the Scientific Communications final presentation. For those who haven't registered to the for those who haven't signed up for the attendance list, please go to the SIX as soon as possible because the attendance list is closed at, or is it already closed? I guess so. Okay, so if you need more information related to the final presentation session, don't hesitate to inform me, and then if there are no questions, then let us close today's session and let us see you again on Monday meeting. Okay, thank you all and good and good morning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thanks, sir.